If you stand near the back, behind the floral arch, the photographer can angle the lens so your face is entirely shadowed by the hydrangeas. It's actually a very artistic composition, Ethan. Very modern. My mother, Susan, said this without a hint of irony. She was adjusting a $400 silk scarf around her neck, squinting at a digital wedding mood board on her iPad. Across the marble kitchen island of my parents' suburban Chicago home, my sister Sienna didn't even look up from her phone. She was aggressively swiping through a PDF of seating charts, her freshly manicured acrylic nails clicking against the screen like a telegraph machine broadcasting an impending disaster. "It's not just artistic, Mom. It's necessary," Sienna chimed in, her voice dripping with that rehearsed, airy sweetness she used for her 90,000 social media followers. Tristan's family is literally old money Gold Coast. His father, Arthur, is on the board of 3 different museums. His aunts wear vintage Chanel to brunch. If my tech support-looking brother is front and center in a wrinkled, off-the-rack suit from Kohl's, it completely ruins the aesthetic. Tristan's mother already thinks we're borderline provincial. I need this to look flawless. My brand needs this. "I don't work in tech support, Sienna," I said, keeping my voice level, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "I'm a software engineer, and the suit I wore to Marcus's firm dinner last month cost more than your rent." Sienna finally looked up, letting out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Oh, please. You write code for a living, Ethan. You look like a guy who survives on energy drinks and frozen pizza. Tristan's groomsmen are all literal corporate attorneys, investment bankers, and polo players. You'd stick out like a thumb that's been slammed in a car door. Look, we're just asking you to be realistic. You can still come to the reception. We'll put you at table 14. It's near the kitchen, so the service is actually super fast." I looked at my father, Richard, who was sitting in his favorite leather armchair, pretending to read the financial section of the newspaper. He hadn't made eye contact with me since I walked through the door. "Dad?" I asked. "You're okay with this?" My father lowered the paper just an inch. He sighed, a heavy, defeated sound that he always made right before he completely folded to whatever my mother and sister wanted. "Ethan, your sister has worked very hard to build her image. This marriage into the Vance family. It's a big deal for all of us. It puts our family name in rooms we've never even had access to. If Sienna feels like your presence in the main wedding party might complicate things with Arthur Vance, maybe it's best to just cooperate. It's just one day." "It's just one day," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. They had no idea. They had absolutely no clue who I actually was. To my family, I was the boring, dependable older brother who got a nice little tech job after college and quietly faded into the background. When our parents fell behind on their mortgage 3 years ago because my father's boutique real estate firm took a massive hit, it was Ethan who quietly wired them $20,000. They never asked how I had it. They just took it, assumed I had cleaned out my modest savings account, and never brought it up again. When Sienna needed a co-signer for her luxury apartment lease in downtown Chicago because her influencer career didn't provide a verifiable tax return, I was the one who signed the papers. But 6 months ago, the small mobile security startup I had co-founded with my college roommate, Marcus, was quietly acquired by a major European cybersecurity conglomerate. The deal was ironclad, confidential, and massive. When the dust settled and the lawyers finished their work, my bank account didn't show a modest salary anymore. It showed a balance of exactly $5,120,000. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't move into a penthouse. I kept my rent-controlled 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, kept driving my reliable 5-year-old Honda, and kept my mouth shut. I knew exactly what would happen if my family found out. My mother would discover a sudden, life-threatening need for a country club membership. My father would ask me to invest in one of his high-risk commercial real estate gambits. And Sienna would expect me to fund her entire extravagant lifestyle under the guise of family solidarity. So I played the part. I let them think I was the struggling middle-class programmer. "You know what?" I said, setting my coffee cup down on the counter with a soft clink. "You're completely right. I wouldn't want to ruin the aesthetic." Sienna beamed, instantly switching back to her vibrant, screen-ready persona. "Oh, thank God. I knew you'd understand, E. You can still watch the live stream from the hotel suite if you don't want to sit at table 14. I'll give you the private link." "Don't worry about the live stream," I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. "Actually, don't worry about me at all. I think I'm going to take a vacation that weekend." My mother frowned, her eyebrows knitting together. "A vacation, Ethan? The wedding is in 3 weeks. People might ask where you are at the reception." Just tell them I'm in the back, behind the hydrangeas, I said. I walked out of the house, the heavy wooden front door clicking shut behind me. As I sat in my Honda, staring at the manicured lawn of my childhood home, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. The invisible chains of obligation, the constant low-grade humiliation of being the family's afterthought, it all evaporated. I dialed Marcus. "Hey, man," Marcus answered on the second ring, the background noise of his downtown office buzzing through the line. "What's up? Did you survive the family brunch?" "Marcus, remember that luxury timber frame cabin on the lake in Upper Michigan? The one with the private dock and the indoor sauna we looked at last month? The one listed for a cool $1.2 million? Yeah, I remember. Why?" "Call the broker. Tell them I'm making a cash offer today, full asking price, on one condition. I want the keys by Friday, and clear your schedule for the first weekend of next month. We're going on a trip." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus let out a low whistle. "The weekend of your sister's royal wedding?" "I've been uninvited from the photos, Marcus. I'm too middle class for the venue." "Say no more," Marcus said, his voice hardening with absolute loyalty. "I'm calling the broker right now." The next 2 weeks were a blur of high-level administrative tasks and quiet preparation. While my family was drowning in a sea of floral arrangements, seating charts, and pre-wedding anxiety, I was orchestrating a massive, silent shift in my life. I closed on the Michigan property within 7 days. The cabin was a masterpiece of modern architecture, massive walls of glass overlooking a secluded, crystal-clear lake, surrounded by dense pine forests. It was completely isolated, peaceful, and entirely mine. But there was one final piece of business I needed to attend to before I could truly cut the cord. Despite how they treated me, Richard and Susan were still my parents. They had raised me, and though they had completely lost their way in the pursuit of social status, I didn't want to leave them completely vulnerable. More importantly, I wanted to ensure that they could never, under any circumstances, claim that I owed them anything. I wanted my ledger with them to be completely, unassailably clean. I scheduled a meeting with my estate attorney, David Vance. No relation to Tristan's family, just a funny coincidence. David's office was located in a towering glass skyscraper in the Loop, overlooking the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. "Ethan, good to see you," David said, shaking my hand and motioning for me to sit down in a plush leather chair. "I reviewed the documents you sent over. You want to liquidate a portion of your liquid capital to pay off a residential mortgage?" "Yes," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my inner pocket. "This is the account information for my parents' mortgage with Chase Bank. The outstanding balance is exactly $284,500. I want it paid in full, immediately." David raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses. "That's a very generous gift, Ethan. Do you want me to draw up a formal gift deed or an announcement letter for them?" "No," I replied firmly. "I want it done completely anonymously. It needs to look like a banking anomaly or a corporate restructuring settlement from their original lender. If they ask questions, the bank should simply inform them that the title has been cleared and the lien is released. My name must not appear anywhere on the transaction documents. Understood?" David looked at me for a long moment, sensing the absolute gravity in my voice. He nodded slowly. "Understood. I'll route the funds through a blind trust. By Tuesday afternoon, your parents will officially own their home free and clear. They won't have a single dime of debt on that property." "Thank you, David. That's exactly what I need." When I left his office, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. It was my respect moment. I hadn't done it to buy their love, and I certainly hadn't done it to brag. I did it because I respected the concept of family enough to ensure they were secure, even if they didn't respect me enough to let me stand in their wedding photos. It was the ultimate clean slate. I owed them nothing. They owed me nothing. The following Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, I packed my bags into the Honda. I drove down to Marcus's place. He threw his luggage into the trunk, and we hit the interstate, heading north toward the Michigan border. As the Chicago skyline faded into the rearview mirror, my phone began to buzz in the center console. It was a text from my mother. "Sienna's rehearsal dinner is starting at the Peninsula. Tristan's family bought her a vintage diamond tennis bracelet. We look so official. Hope you're having a nice little weekend wherever you are?" I didn't reply. I reached over, pressed the power button on my phone, and held it until the screen went completely black. I tossed the phone into the glove compartment and shut it. "Total blackout?" Marcus asked, glancing over from the passenger seat. "Total blackout. I confirmed, stepping on the gas. For the next 72 hours, Ethan the software engineer doesn't exist. The Peninsula Hotel in downtown Chicago is the pinnacle of luxury. The grand ballroom features soaring ceilings, massive crystal chandeliers, and a terrace overlooking the glittering lights of the city. For Sienna, this venue was the ultimate validation of her existence. On Saturday afternoon, the venue was a hive of frantic activity. The floral arrangements, tens of thousands of dollars worth of white orchids and cascading hydrangeas, were being hoisted onto massive arches. The tables were set with custom linen, sterling silver, and heavy crystal. In the bridal suite, Sienna was in a state of absolute manic euphoria. Her hair and makeup team had been working on her for 4 hours. 2 of her bridesmaid friends were recording behind-the-scenes footage for her Instagram stories. "Where is the catering coordinator?" Sienna demanded, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the room like a razor blade. The caviar blinnies for the pre-reception cocktail hour were supposed to be chilled on customized sculptures of swans. I just looked at the staging area, and they're on regular glass platters. This is a joke. Her maid of honor, a fellow influencer named Tiffany, checked her phone. "Sienna, calm down." The catering director said the ice sculptures cracked during transit. "I don't care if they shattered into 1,000,000 pieces," Sienna screamed, slamming her perfume bottle down on the vanity. "They need to freeze new ones. Do you know how much money we are paying them? Tell that incompetent coordinator that if those swans aren't on the floor in 30 minutes, I'm going to tag their agency in a call-out video that will ruin their business." Outside the suite, the catering coordinator, a young woman named Elena, was standing in the hallway, fighting back tears. She had spent the last 6 months enduring Sienna's relentless, screaming abuse, late-night text threats, and constant demands for free upgrades in exchange for social media exposure. This was the final straw. Elena walked down to the manager's office, her hands shaking. "I'm done," she told the general manager of the hotel's event division. "The bride just threatened to ruin our entire corporate reputation online because of a transit accident. She's been screaming at the kitchen staff, called the head chef a glorified line cook, and the family's credit card on file for incidentals just bounced." The general manager, a stern, no-nonsense man named Mr. Harrison, frowned. "The incidental card bounced? For how much?" "The venue contingency fee," Elena said, handing him a clipboard. "Because her guests brought in unauthorized drone equipment and professional camera crews without our insurance waivers, we levied the standard $150,000 high-risk security deposit. The card her father provided was declined. When I asked him about it, he told me to just run it again later and walked away." Mr. Harrison's expression hardened. The Peninsula didn't tolerate abuse of their staff, and they certainly didn't tolerate financial non-compliance from families trying to play high society. He walked straight to the groom's suite, where Tristan and his father, Arthur Vance, were getting into their tuxedos. Arthur Vance was a man of immense stature in Chicago, distinguished, quiet, and fiercely protective of his family's ancient, pristine reputation. He was currently sipping a vintage scotch while a tailor adjusted his lapel. "Mr. Vance," Mr. Harrison said, stepping into the room with an air of professional solemnity, "may I speak with you and Tristan privately for a moment?" Tristan turned around, looking confused. "What's going on, Harrison? Is there an issue with the champagne?" "There is an issue with the bride's family," Mr. Harrison said smoothly. "The incidental and safety contingency card provided by Mr. Richard Miller has been declined for the amount of $150,000. Furthermore, the bride has created a hostile environment for our staff, threatening our corporate digital assets and verbally abusing our culinary team. According to our strict venue policy, if the outstanding balance is not cleared via certified wire or cash within the next 15 minutes, we will be forced to cancel the event and clear the ballroom." Arthur Vance's glass froze halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly on the mahogany table. "The card bounced? For $150,000? "Correct, sir," Harrison replied. Arthur looked at his son, his eyes narrowing. "Tristan, I thought you told me Sienna's family was well established. Her father owns a luxury real estate firm, does he not?" He does, Dad," Tristan stammered, a bead of sweat breaking out on his forehead. "I'm sure it's just a banking error. Let me go talk to Richard." 5 minutes later, a full-blown panic had erupted in the staging area outside the ballroom. Richard and Susan Miller were being confronted by Tristan, Arthur Vance, and the hotel management. "Richard, what the hell is this?" Tristan demanded, his aristocratic composure cracking. "The hotel is threatening to lock the doors. Pay the damn fee." Richard Miller looked pale, his skin a sickly shade of gray under the bright corridor lights. Tristan, I can't. The business, we've had a terrible quarter. The market shifted, and our liquid assets are tied up in a commercial development in the suburbs. I thought my corporate line of credit would cover the buffer, but it's capped out. Susan gasped, clutching her pearls. Richard! What are you saying? You told me everything was handled. Tristan's family is standing right here. Arthur Vance stepped forward, his voice terrifyingly calm, carrying the weight of generational wealth and absolute authority. Richard, let me get this straight. You threw a wedding of this scale, invited the top tier of Chicago society, and you don't even have $150,000 in liquid reserves to cover the basic venue insurance? Arthur, please, Susan begged, her voice cracking with desperation. It's just a temporary cash flow issue. We own our home. We're good for it. The hotel doesn't take houses as collateral for a Saturday night dinner, Susan, Arthur snapped, his disgust palpable. This is an embarrassment. If the press or our associates find out that we are marrying into a family that is essentially bankrupt and committing financial fraud at the altar, our name will be dragged through the mud. Tristan, call it off. Dad, wait! Tristan cried out. No, Arthur said coldly. Look at them. They are grifters playing dress-up. Look at the daughter screaming in the room next door. This entire family is a house of cards. Desperate, frantic, and staring into the abyss of absolute social ruin, Richard Miller did something he hadn't done in years. He remembered his son. He didn't know about the $5 million, but he remembered that Ethan always had money. Ethan had paid the $20,000 mortgage shortfall. Ethan was a tech guy. He had zero debt, a stable job, and clean credit. Wait! Richard yelled, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. My son Ethan. He's a high-level software executive. He handles massive corporate accounts. He has clean capital. I'll call him. He'll co-sign a predatory bridge loan right now, or he'll wire the funds from his tech firm. He's part of this family. He won't let this happen. Richard frantically dialed my number. The subscriber you are trying to reach is currently unavailable or outside the coverage area. Please try again later. He's not answering. Richard panicked. Susan, call him. Sienna, call him. Within minutes, the entire Miller family was in a state of absolute screaming hysteria. Sienna, running out of the bridal suite with her veil trailing behind her, was sobbing so hard her makeup was running down her cheeks in thick black tracks. Where is he? Sienna shrieked, her voice echoing down the luxury hallway. Where is that pathetic little nerd? Call him. Tell him he's ruining my life. If he doesn't answer his phone right now, I'm going to kill him. They called my phone 50 times. They called Marcus. They sent dozens of increasingly unhinged text messages. Nothing. The phone remained completely, utterly dead. 300 miles away, the sun was setting over the calm, glassy waters of the Michigan Lake. The air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and fresh water. Marcus and I were sitting on the massive wrap-around deck of my new cabin, the outdoor fire pit crackling warmly between us. We had a pair of perfectly grilled ribeye steaks on our plates and 2 glasses of high-end bourbon in our hands. It was the most peaceful I had felt in a decade. You know, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair and looking out at the twilight sky. It's about 7 o'clock back in Chicago. Right about now, your sister is probably walking down the aisle, soaking in the applause of a bunch of people she doesn't actually know. I smiled, taking a sip of my drink. Good for her. I hope she got her ice swans. I looked at the glove compartment of the car parked in the driveway through the glass, then looked down at my watch. The wedding was supposed to have started an hour ago. The reception should be underway. If there was any family emergency, a real one, I should probably check. I didn't want to be completely cruel, just detached. I'm going to turn it on for 5 minutes, I said, standing up, just to make sure the house didn't burn down. Go ahead, Marcus laughed. But if your sister is calling to brag about her vintage diamond bracelet, you're buying the next round of steaks. I walked down to the driveway, opened the Honda's glove compartment, and retrieved my phone. I pressed the power button. The moment the device connected to the local cellular tower, it didn't just buzz. It violently vibrated for a solid 45 seconds without stopping. The screen became a flashing wall of red and white. 47 missed calls from Dad, 32 missed calls from Mom, 18 missed calls from Sienna, 114 text messages. My brow furrowed. I opened the text messages. Dad, 6:12 p.m. Ethan. Answer the phone. This is a life or death emergency. We need your financial signature. Mom, 6:18 p.m. Ethan, please. Oh my God, where are you? Tristan's father is calling off the wedding. The hotel needs $150,000 right now, or they're kicking us out onto the street. Sienna, 6:25 p.m. You selfish piece of trash, answer me. You are ruining my life. Wire the money now. Dad says you have clean credit to co-sign the loan. Dad, 6:40 p.m. Ethan, we went to your apartment to find your financial papers or tax returns. Landlord wouldn't let us in, but we drove to the old house to look through your childhood bedroom files. We found your corporate acquisition statements from the startup buyout. Ethan, you have $5 million? Oh my God. Ethan, call me immediately. You have to save your sister. You have to save this family. I stared at the screen, my heart rate remaining entirely steady. They had gone through my old room. They had found the acquisition documents I had left in my locked security box. They finally knew. Suddenly, the phone began to ring again. The caller ID showed Dad. I slid the bar to answer, walked back onto the deck, and placed the phone face up on the wooden table between Marcus and me. I hit the speakerphone button. Ethan? My father's voice erupted from the speaker, sounding entirely broken, breathless, and manic. In the background, I could hear my mother loudly weeping and Sienna screaming at someone in the distance. Ethan! Oh my God! Thank the Lord! Where have you been? I told you, Dad. I'm on vacation, I said, my voice as calm as the lake behind me. Ethan, listen to me, Richard yelled, his voice cracking with a terrifying mixture of panic and sudden, unearned reverence. We're at the peninsula. The wedding? It's a disaster. The hotel charged a massive security fee, and my business accounts are locked up. Tristan's father was going to call it off, but then we found it. Ethan, we found your papers in the basement files, the $5 million from the software sale. Oh my God, son, you're a millionaire. You're incredibly wealthy. I know, I said simply. Why didn't you tell us? My mother's voice shrieked as she leaned closer to the phone, her voice thick with tears. Ethan, your own family. We've been struggling with the mortgage, and you've been sitting on a fortune. But we can talk about that later. Right now, you need to call the Peninsula Hotel event office. Tell them you're authorizing a $150,000 wire transfer from your corporate account. Sienna's wedding is being canceled. Tristan's father is pulling the plug. You have to save your sister. She deserves this day, Ethan. She's your sister. I looked at Marcus. Marcus just shook his head, a look of profound disgust on his face. This was my karma moment. The universe had lined everything up perfectly, delivering the ultimate verdict on years of neglect, exclusion, and superficial greed. Mom, I said, my voice chillingly quiet. Take a deep breath. Did you do it? She gasps. Are you calling the bank? No, I said. I'm not calling the bank, and I'm not wiring a single penny. The line went entirely silent for a 2-second beat before Sienna's voice cut through, sharp and venomous. Ethan! You pathetic, bitter little loser. You're doing this on purpose because I didn't put you in the front row of the photos. You're ruining my life over a stupid seating chart. I'm your sister. You have $5 million. $150,000 is pocket change to you. It's not about the photos, Sienna, I said, each word deliberate and ice cold. And Mom, to answer your question about the mortgage, check your Chase Bank portal. I had my estate attorney liquidate $250,000 last week to pay off your house in full. You own your home free and clear. I took care of you. Because despite how you've treated me, I respected you enough to ensure you were safe. A sharp, collective gasp came through the speakerphone. I could hear my father whispering, The mortgage is paid? But as for you, Sienna, I continued, and as for this wedding, you explicitly told me 2 weeks ago that my average middle-class vibe would ruin the aesthetic of your royal high society event. You told me I was a tech support nobody who would embarrass you in front of Tristan's wealthy old money family. Ethan, I was just stressed, Sienna cried, her voice shifting into a manipulative sob. I didn't mean it. Please, Ethan, Tristan's dad is standing right here. He's listening. Good, I said, knowing Arthur Vance was within earshot. I hope he is listening, because here is my final answer. Since I am far too middle class to be in your wedding photos, Sienna, I am far too middle class to fund your wedding venue. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Ethan, wait, no, my father yelled. I reached down, pressed the red end call button, and immediately held down the power key until the phone shut off completely. I tossed it back into the glove compartment, walked back to my chair, and picked up my glass of bourbon. Marcus raised his glass to me, a massive, proud grin spreading across his face. To a middle-class vacation, he said. To a very quiet, very expensive vacation, I replied, clinking my glass against his. The fallout from that evening was legendary, the kind of high society drama that the Chicago elite would whisper about for years. Because the Miller family couldn't produce the funds, Mr. Harrison and the Peninsula security team strictly enforced their policy. The doors to the grand ballroom were locked. The staff began breaking down the floral arches, and the 300 guests, dressed in their finest black tie attire, were politely informed at the entrance that the wedding had been canceled due to a contractual failure by the bride's family. Arthur Vance didn't just pull the funding, he pulled his son. Having witnessed the utter financial desperation, the screaming vitriol, and the realization that the Millers had tried to illegally leverage a son they had actively alienated, Arthur made it clear that marrying Sienna would be a liability to their family name. Tristan, entirely spineless and horrified by the trashy public breakdown, broke off the engagement that very night via a text message. Sienna's perfect influencer life shattered instantly. The story of the bounced check and the canceled Peninsula wedding leaked to local social media circles within 48 hours. Her followers plummeted, her sponsor contracts were canceled under morality and reputational risk clauses, and she became a pariah in the very high society circles she had sacrificed everything to join. My parents were left in a state of permanent, bitter irony. They lived in a beautiful suburban home that was completely paid off, entirely free of debt, a massive financial gift that 99% of parents could only dream of. Yet, every single day they sat in that house, it served as a brutal, inescapable reminder of the son they had discarded, the son who had quietly saved them while they were busy worshiping a daughter who brought them nothing but ruin. They tried to mail letters to my apartment, but the letters were returned to sender. 2 months after that fateful weekend, I finalized the paperwork to transfer my assets and my engineering focus to a new cybersecurity venture based in Zurich, Switzerland. On my final night in Chicago, Marcus and I went out for a casual dinner at a small, unassuming burger joint in Lincoln Park. No crystal chandeliers, no ice sculptures, no high society dress codes, just good food and quiet peace. "So," Marcus said, wiping his hands with a napkin, "Zurich next week. Are you going to tell them your new Swiss address?" I looked out the window at the bustling, gritty, beautiful streets of the city that had built me. I thought about the text messages, the greed, and the final, beautiful silence of that lake in Michigan. "No," I smiled, taking a final sip of my drink. "As far as they're concerned, I'm just a guy who works in tech support, and I think it's best if we leave the aesthetic exactly as it is."